Jabril Robinson was murdered May 16, 2016 in Clayton County, Georgia. Officer Charlie McDaniel radioed for backup, in which Dwayne Parkins was dispatched to the scene. Once Dwayne Parkins arrived on the scene, he came in contact with my son and immediately shot him in the back of his head.
Harry Baxter Jr. was killed by Oakland police on January the 16th, 2011. He ran up the street, and the neighbors of seeing him run up both streets, and they said he was zigzagging, and they were and there was a guy chasing him and shooting at him, and he hit him in the back with a bullet, and Kerry fell to the ground.
Marquise Jones was killed by San Antonio police. On that day, I was getting ready for work, and I saw there was a shooting at Chacho's and Chalucci's around 5 in the morning. And I remember saying they need to close their restaurant down because it is always someone being killed there. There's always fights there, always this. And I see the yellow chalk tarp, and I say, Lord, bless their family. I could hear my sister crying, who is Marquise's son, saying they killed him. I remembering I could not breathe. I could not catch my breath.
Jacob Dominguez was murdered by San Jose Police Department on September 15, 2017. Officer Michael Pena, part of a covert response unit, on unmarked cars, no sirens, no lights, plainclothes officers boxed in Jacob, killing him within 20 seconds of having him contained. No de-escalation. After he was dead, they put in the canine to maul up his throat.
My name is Monty Benjamin, the mother of Javis Benjamin, who was killed by Officer Lynn Thomas of the Avondale State Police Department on January 18, 2013. Javis was not looking in the direction of Officer Thomas. He was engaging with the people in the community. Officer Thomas began to move backwards. Javis then looked in his direction. At this time, Officer Thomas then shot Javis twice, once in the heart and the other in the lower abdomen with his hands raised.
My name is Adrienne Hood, the mother of Henry Green V, who was killed by 2 plainclothes police officers here in Columbus, Ohio, June 6 of 2016. Many of the witnesses that were outside said that the officers never identified themselves. They jumped out the vehicle, all while firing at my son. My son, Henry, was shot 8 times from a total of 22 bullets that were fired at him. And he lay on the sidewalk and took his last breaths.
My name is Janet Baker. My son was heinously murdered by someone who was supposed to serve and protect him. When I wake up in the morning, my son is the first thing on my mind. When I go to bed at night, I labor. Did I do the right things? Did I make the right calls? Did I align myself with the right groups? Did I speak out for justice enough? Or did I say the wrong things? Did I somehow hinder getting justice for it?
My name is Geraldine Brown Bluford, the mother of Alan Dwayne Bluford, who was killed by Oakland Police Department officer Miguel Masso on May the 6th of 2012. Alan, who was not under arrest, not read any Miranda rights, began to leave. As he was walking away from the scene, the police officer turned off his lapel camera and began to chase Alan. Alan was running, according to witness statements, yelling, "I didn't do anything." The officer took out his weapon, shooting himself in the foot. Alan heard the gunshot and fell to the ground with hands up. According to witness statements, the police officer walked over to Alan as he was lying on the ground and shot him in his chest 3 times.
My name is Sheila Banks, the godmother and auntie of Corey Jones that was killed by Newman Roger, October 18, 2015. Police officer Newman Roger approached him, and within a few seconds or so, Corey was running for his life. He was shot at 6 times. He was hit 3 times. And boy, I tell you, our lives have never been the same.
My name is Kathy Scott Lights, the mother of Jarvis Lights, who was killed by a Georgia State Trooper on December 29, 2017. They stated that Jarvis exited his vehicle. There was no body cam or dash cam to confirm this statement. It was reported that Jarvis attempted to return back to his car when Officer Nolan attacked him from the back of his body. Jarvis came back up out of his car after he found what he was searching for with his arms raised in the air. State Trooper Nolan stated that he didn't know what that object was in Jarvis' hand, and he shot Jarvis in his right upper shoulder arm. And the object that was in Jarvis' hand was his cell phone, which was found next to his body after he had been shot on the ground, bleeding out.
Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our Voices of Struggle and Hope, Mothers Speak Out Against Police Brutality, a series of online dialogues happening all of this week, beginning November 14th through the 18th, every day from starting at 12 noon, and then again at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. The MAPB Fellows will share their direct experiences of losing a child to police violence. Their stories are the first person truth behind the 1,000 fatal shootings that happen and documented, that are documented in America. We believe that it's far more many than that, but the ones that are documented every year in America. I am Colette Flanagan, the founder of MAPB. I will be moderating the sessions along with the co-founder, John Fullenwater, who's a longtime human rights activist and organizer in Dallas. Just to tell you a little bit about the MAPB Fellowship Legacy Program, it is a leadership development initiative operating in 10 cities. Out of hundreds of applicants, the 10 fellows that were special women that were chosen to be fellows to lead in this MAPB Legacy Program are the fellows that will be having their dialogues this week. We've had a tremendous response to the dialogues. We're happy that you're here. The fellows are women who have endured the loss of a child or a loved one through deadly police brutality. And each fellow has a track record of advocating for their martyred children or loved ones. And they have a track record of organizing for change in their hometowns and in their communities. The MAPB Fellowship Program is a key component in the continuing development of our national network that is part of families directly impacted by police violence. I founded Mothers Against Police Brutality because an officer in Dallas, Texas killed my son, my only son, Clinton Allen, was 25 years old. He's a father of twin boys, a Black father of twin boys. Clinton was unarmed the night of March the 10th, 2013, when a Dallas officer shot Clinton 7 times, 5 times in the center of his chest, once in his left raised arm, and once in the back at close range. Clinton's killing contained almost every dimension of the current crisis in policing in the United States. My son was a Black man, and a Black person is 2.5 times more likely to be shot to death by police. My son was unarmed, yet he was perceived by a fully armed white officer as a lethal threat. This officer escaped all criminal and civil accountability for killing my son. No charges, no indictment, no trial, and no damages. MAPB has 2 major initiatives that we are working on this year, excuse me, and that we are working on this year. And the first is taking this issue of police violence and extrajudicial killings to the United Nations. Our organization is working and collaborating with working groups within the United Nations at the Commissioner of High Court level, which is extremely phenomenal. I am just recently back from Geneva, participating in the United Nations 52nd Human Rights Council session. This work is important at this level because police brutality is global and it needs a global response. And then again, the fellowship program, as I just mentioned, which teaches and empowers the fellows to become leaders in the larger scope of the movement against police brutality and putting them at tables that they should be. Quite often, the families are the voices that we don't hear and that we should be hearing. They're not usually part of processes when legislation is created. And fellowship program puts these families in the center when possible. Our fellow on the panel this evening is Rosie Chavez, who is an MAPB fellow and organizer with Silicon Valley Debug. Rosie's nephew, Jacob Dominguez, was killed by San Jose police on September 15th in 2017. Our panelists joining us this evening, Sharon Watkins, who I don't think she's made it yet. Oh, there she is Sharon Watkins. She's a mother of 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. Her youngest son was killed also by San Jose police on February the 11th, 2015. She is currently employed at San Jose State University in Silicon Valley Debug as a community organizer. She is the author of Valley of the Shadow. Her book is a heartfelt account of the journey for peace after the killing of a mother's child. I have to get that book. And our next panelist is my friend and scholar, Dr. Marvin Delaney. Dr. Marvin Delaney is Associate Professor of History at Imatrus, former intern director of the Center of African American Studies and the former chair of the Department of History at the University of Texas at Arlington. He serves on the board of directors of the Texas State Historical Association and the editorial board of the Legacies, a history journal for Dallas and North Texas Central. Dr. Delaney's first book was Black Police in America, published in 1996. It is still considered the best concise history on the subject. Currently, he is completing a social and political history of African Americans in Dallas, Texas, a book that will be published by the Texas A&M University Press. Dr. Delaney is an activist scholar, most recently as a major voice in the successful movement to take down Confederate statues and icons in Dallas, Texas. Welcome you both here today. Thank you for your time, for being here. We are most appreciative. Dr. Delaney, I'll, since I'm here right in your space, I will start with you. I'm very familiar with your outstanding work and your contribution in the African American studies and your studies in Black police in America. Tell us a little bit about your work in that arena.
Sure. As you sort of mentioned, police brutality is a worldwide problem. It's also been very historical. So part of why I wrote the book, again, it's been out 20 years now. I wrote the book because in the past, African Americans in particular thought that they could solve the police brutality problem by having more African Americans assigned as police officers on police departments throughout the country. And to a certain extent, I'd say in the 1940s, 1950s, and then into the 1960s, they were right. The statistics show that police brutality went down, that African Americans did treat African American citizens better than they had ever been treated by police officers in the history of this country. And in addition, African American police officers formed police associations in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, here in Dallas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, with a sort of a social consciousness where they pushed the idea that they were members of the African American community, and as such, they were fathers, brothers, you know, and obviously sons in the African American community. So they took on this idea that since we're members of the community, we are going to protect the community, provide our brothers and sisters and sons and daughters better policing than they had typically gotten throughout the history of law enforcement in this country. So in a way, you know, I was very, how can I put it? I had this sort of vision that maybe this might be the solution to police brutality in our country. And of course, the solution to better law enforcement in general. But what has happened, and again, this is sort of a general assessment of current conditions, what has happened is that now many Black police officers are more police than they are Black. And many of them have moved out of the communities. And then again, there's nothing wrong with that. We want people to be able to live wherever they want to live. But right. By them living outside of the community and moving out, they don't identify with the African American community as I'd say Black police officers did in the past. I'm sorry for being so long-winded.
Oh, no. You're absolutely right in everything that you're saying. And I think that sometimes, you know, it takes a little bit more time to pontificate and so that, you know, people understand the significance of your studies, because it's very intricate and it can be very complicated because we expect the same. I always say with Black politicians, we treat our Black politicians like rock stars. They come to our churches, they ask for our votes, and then we ask nothing of them. And so I think your study with Black policemen was very on point, and I think that more people should read about it. We've even heard stories of Black policemen being on duty and being killed by white policemen.
Yeah. You
know, they're not, in most cases, perceived by their counterparts as blue. No. Right. And so, you know, your study is very, very, very interesting. Thank you for your contribution. Sure. And thank you for being here tonight. Our next panelist, Sharon Watkins. Thank you so much for being here today. I know you were having some issues getting on, but I think if you're on, can tell us.
Yes, I'm on now.
Oh, thank you. Hi. You can tell us a little bit about your work. First of all, you can please tell us about your son. Very sorry about your loss, losing a child to police brutality.
Right.
Tell us about your son and also about your work at Debug with Rosie.
Okay, so my son Philip was 23 years old, and he was having a mental episode. His fiance had called and said, he was thinking about suicide, and I'm like, well, what happened? Because I mean, he didn't have a history of mental illness um, that I'm aware of, but he was having an episode that day. So his fiance's mother called, and she asked them specifically. She said, he's having an episode. Don't send the police. He needs help. So they said, okay, well, we'll send a CIT officer, because there wasn't any other option other than the police, really. And within 5 minutes of them showing up, or a few minutes after they showed up, Phil was calm, and he was talking to his fiance and her mom. So when the police showed up, so he saw the police, and then he just started running towards them, and he had in his hand a pocket knife. There were two officers. I was told they were formerly part of the gang unit, and they took a look at Phil, and he was coming towards them, and he was 50 feet away from them, and they decided that they were going to shoot him because he didn't drop the pocket knife. Now, when this happened, he had a 2.5-year-old daughter that was in the car. He had been working 2 jobs because, you got his then girlfriend pregnant, and he was trying to go to school. So he already had a lot of stress and that type of thing. And while this whole thing was happening, his fiance, her mom was saying, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. He needs help, and and trying to talk to them. And then policemen pulled the guns on them because they needed to get back, is what they were telling them. And so they came in, and in my opinion, because you come and your guns are drawn, you're not coming to do any type of de-escalation other than you're basically there to eliminate. And and then they were saying that, well, the policemen can't listen to what other people were saying to them, and there's a whole lot of reasons and a whole lot of support for the officers. Whether or not this is a justified shooting, which what they call is if they fear for their life, then it's justified in taking your loved one's life, and that's unacceptable. And I have been working with debug. I got to tell you first, I was very naive when this happened. I thought this was like a one-off. And then as I was getting to know the other families and meeting families through Silicon Valley debug, I was like, what, you mean this happens all the time? Right. And so many stories were similar or the same or even worse. And I was like, this has got to stop. My granddaughter, who's now 10 years old, missed all the time with her dad. So she's going to basically
We may have lost Sharon.
Going to come out. And the point is with San Jose State, well, with San Jose policemen and probably with policemen all over the country, they know that they can kill you without accountability, without consequences. So they're going to do it. Absolutely. As opposed to if there were consequences attached to it, then maybe they would try some other way to de-escalate. Especially there are 2 of you. He has a pocket knife. That blade is about 4 inches long. A legal weapon, that blade would have to be 6 inches. Right. So, and they're 2, and that was the only strategy you had, was to take the gun out and shoot them. So this has got to stop. And we support other families that have gone through something like this. I've gone and participated in getting bills passed to try to prevent this from happening again or to another family. we've challenged the DA. We do our marching and we are challenging. We go through the information that we can get from them, and find holes and things like that. Right now, I'm participating on the board that we are, well, AB 118 passed here, and I'm not sure if you are familiar with that one, that we have non-law enforcement mobile response teams, and so I'm participating in there as a stakeholder. So we determine who gets the funding for that. But it's exhausting work. It is very tedious work, but if I am going to keep working at it as long as there's breath in my body, because saving one life is worth all the work, all the sleepless nights, all the marching, all the protesting, all the writing letters. All that is going to be worth it, because your loved one is not replaceable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for supporting Rosie today and being here to support her on the panel. We appreciate your presence. Rosie, thank you for being here today. I know your family has just recently gone through a civil court battle on behalf of Jacob. I'd like to talk more about that and circle back to that, because I know that it was a very tumultuous time for your family, and you and your family got a chance to just witness some of the atrocities that happen in the courtroom that are not supposed to happen. You got a chance to see how unbalanced the scales are for families, and how the scales tend to tip toward law enforcement. But first, tell us about Jacob, what type of person he was and the things that he enjoyed. Just tell us a little bit about Jacob.
Okay, thank you. Jacob, I was 13 when my sister had him. So he was more like a little brother growing up with me. And then as I got married and had my own family, Jacob was part of that family with me. My sister, I helped her, I supported her in whatever his needs were. Jacob was a fun kid. He loved to do, we used to call him a little jump, always running around full of energy, totally energy. So we used to just, helping raise him was a blessing. Loved that kid. Treated him like my own. My mom, his grandmother, he was the firstborn. He was my sister's only son. She has 2 kids, but he was her only son. It was the firstborn nephew, firstborn grandson. He was everything to us. He was the glue to the family. He was the older brother to my kids, to my other nephews. So Jacob loved family. He loved to be with the family. He didn't like debates or disagreements. He liked our family to be in unity. It really bothered him when we worked. So he was somebody, as a single mom, that I could turn to when I was having problems with my boys at teenage years, that he could help me there. He literally would help me and encourage the boys to do positive. He became a father. He took that on. He was, being raised by a single mom himself, and grandma and aunties helping. Jacob was a little, like, how would I say this? He was, how was he going to do the job when he was raised by mothers and he wasn't raised by a father, right? So he did good. He did good. His kids loved him. He loved to be engaged with them. He had 2 boys. When we found out he was going to have a little girl, the last 2 are like 11 months apart. Oh my goodness. He's like, what am I going to do with a little girl? Oh my God. He just didn't know how he was going to handle that. They were inseparable. That was we call her mama girl. That was his mama girl. So Jacob was just like, he was our light for our family. He, like my mom said, our piece of puzzle is gone. Like that, there's a missing piece to our puzzle, to our family puzzle. And that was him. And it's been hard. It's been hard, but Jacob was my mom, through all this trauma, my mom's still at the cemetery every day in 5 years. every day. I mean, the trauma, I don't know what she's enduring mentally, but I feel like it's taken a real toll on our family because Jacob was that important to our family. So that's Jacob.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned the toll that it takes on a family. It destroys family when the social contract is broken and a policeman kills your child. The very institution that most of us teach our children to go to if there is a problem, if you need help. It's a level of betrayal that is so deep. It's such an egregious act of betrayal and violence. And a lot of times the families cannot come back together. I remember when Clinton was killed, his sister would go every day, and then she was sleeping at his grave, and we had to go and, and get her. But what was normal? Nobody was prepared for that, or how to act, or what to do. And when a person is killed by the police, he or she is typically portrayed in a negative way.
Definitely.
In most cases, their lives are so rewritten by the police department as a way to substantiate the killing that the victim submerges as a completely different person. Their character is assassinated and obliterated. And a mother can hardly recognize her child by the police department description and the media's portrayal of their child in the aftermath of the shooting. So it is not only do you have that pain, you also have the pain of the act of violence itself, trying to figure out what happened. At the same time, the police and the media is basically just destroying your loved one's character right in front of you. So we always want to ground our reflection in the lived experiences of families who have suffered this horrible crime, because the families are the forefront. They can tell you stories and things that happen because they've lived it. And if you haven't lived it, it's just something you can't fathom. It's just something that you can't imagine that would ever happen. One other thing I'd like for you to share with us, can you take us back, and I know this may be a little painful, but can you take us back to the day that Jacob was murdered by the police? You've already kind of touched on how impactful it was, to your family, and why you're having to stand in for Jacob's mom. And that's part of the trauma, I'm sure, that your family went through, because some mothers just can't do it. Tell us a little bit about what happened that day.
So it was on a Friday night. I remember just coming back from a big church gathering. I was going to bed. I was scrolling through Facebook, seeing that there was an officer-involved shooting. Went to sleep, but I'll read it in the morning. Jacob's wife's cousin called me at 4:30 in the morning, and kind of hung up on him. It's too early. It's late in the night. I just hung up, called back again. And I said, okay, what? And he says, did you see about the news? And I said, no. What are you talking about? He said, Jacob. And I screamed. My 10-year-old at the time was laying in the bed with me. I screamed. I jumped up. I ran down the hallway. My oldest son was living with me. He grabbed the phone from me because I was screaming. I was crying. I just couldn't take in the information he was giving me. And then I had told him, no, it's not him. It's not. I don't want to hear this unless I can't tell his mom. You can't tell his wife until we know it was him. And so he called and I called spontaneously. We called at the same time, the coroner's office. And he was able to get through, and Jacob had distinctive tattoos. And so he was able to describe those distinctive tattoos to Jacob, about Jacob. And he basically said, yes, it was Jacob. Now I remember just screaming, crying, saying, we got to go tell his mom. He was in front of the wife's house. And I said, don't go in, just wait. And he called his aunt, which was Jacob's mother-in-law, and waited till she got there. And I got in the car. My son drove me. I started calling all the family, started calling my mom, started calling my brother, everybody that I needed to call, the immediate family. And I went to his mom's work. She was working graveyard at the time. She was walking in with and I can remember her walking in with milk in her hand. I don't know why I can remember that, but, and she said, what are you doing here? And I said, Jacob. And she said, what? I said, the cops killed him. She screamed, she yelled. We drove back to her apartment, which was really not even a mile away. And I wanted to drive for her, but she wouldn't let me. And she just kept screaming and crying. And we were all ended up at her house, her apartment. The cousin had told Jacob's wife, and she was in the middle of her cul-de-sac screaming and yelling as well. We just all ended up at my sister's. And I remember just having to make all those calls to everybody, and her just going through in and out of phases of crying, and trying to go to the police department. I'm telling her, no, they're not going to tell you anything, but she did. That's a mom, she's going to do, it's her son. You can't stop her from doing what she's going to do. And I remember that day they posted, they had made a news announcement in the media that this suspect, known this, known that, known of his past, known to carry a gun, known to be a gang member,